Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Hello and welcome to the Talk to the Doc podcast, where we dig into the real decisions leaders have to make when growth, pressure, and opportunity all collide. If you've ever felt stuck between working in your business and leading it forward, this is the one podcast you want to lean into. I'm your host, Steve, the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is in. Today, our guest is Reinick. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing great, Steve. How are you?
Well, I'm still feeling a little bit chilled after all this cold weather we've had. How about yourself?
Yeah, we're finally thawing out, and that's a good thing. I don't have to worry about the pool gear freezing over.
Yeah. Now I'm ready to put some shorts on and run at it. Well, Aaron, tell us a little bit about your background and stuff for my audience.
Yeah, so I'm an operations professional with a multi-decade background in manufacturing and operations. So everything from production management up through plant manager, general manager. Spent a good stint at that time in continuous improvement as well. So been around the block. I've led a number of key continuous improvement initiatives across multi-location, nationwide operations. Most recent activities in the corporate world were indirect procurement for large CapEx, large OpEx projects to support a multi-facility nationwide manufacturer. And in the hundreds of millions of dollars of spend per year, and left that engagement about 2 years ago. And I have my own consulting practice now with Aero Group.
Awesome.
And we focus on reducing business costs, indirect and overhead expenses for businesses. Some areas typically where they don't have a lot of visibility and they don't tend to look, they being the business leaders. And so we provide some extra resources and some extra talent and some expertise for their teams that they may not have to be able to cover everything that they need to look at.
Yeah, everybody needs that external eye once in a while. It's so easy to not pay attention to the clutter on your desk and the other stuff that you get used to.
For sure.
Well, let's get into it. So the way I treat your doctor's appointment today is I kind of start off by getting into the vitals. So help me out. Can you share with me what you consider to be kind of the current state of the market, kind of the pulse or industry trends going on? What number resonates with you?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, in terms of what we focus on, we're looking at, primarily mid-market businesses, and we're looking at their indirect and overhead expenses that they just don't have visibility to. So kind of the pulse for me is, most businesses aren't managing, we call this tail spend. So if you're to do a Pareto analysis of the spend of a company spends a lot of time on that top 10% of suppliers, which constitutes about 90% of their spend. And then you've got the rest, you've got the long tail, and there's a bunch of maverick spend out there. There's a bunch of unrationalized, unconsolidated vendor transactions going on there. And that's where we kind of do a deep dive and dig in. And a really interesting statistic is roughly 96% of most mid-market businesses, and those are relatively large, right? You're talking tens of millions of dollars and higher, aren't looking at their tail spend. They're not doing a good job consolidating those things because it's a combination of a lot of stuff that doesn't get a lot of visibility because they're focusing on that top 10%. And it's a combination of playing whack-a-mole when they do focus on it. Where do we go? Where can we provide some benefits in return? And where do we look first? Yeah, and that's the challenge. The challenge is, where do you start?
Yeah, in the IT world, we use the term shadow security, shadow AI, shadow applications, and I can see where having someone to look at the shadow spend that's going on in the business
right.
is important.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, is there a particular area where you find a lot of that shadow spend, where people are just leaking money that they're not aware of?
It actually, every engagement is its own own adventure for the most part. Okay. So we pull the data, and what we have the capability of doing is we've done 40,000 projects over the last 32 years. So we've got a tremendous amount of anonymized data that's segregated by the type of the business, industry, the geographic location, the size of the business. So when we pull their cost information, their AP spend over the last 12 months, we run it through a tool that we use. It's not rocket science, but it's very revealing. So we're able to pull that information, look at those spend categories, and then see those that stick out like a sore thumb that demand some level of attention, or whether the client can take on and do those things themselves, or whether we end up doing it for them. So, you ask big questions about which categories. It can be everything. And I think I mentioned this term to you before, and I like to throw this out there. It can be anything from the grand and glorious, being, IT cloud storage, or
Sure.
International logistics, or foreign exchange fees, or language translation services. Anything that a company has as an indirect and overhead expense, or it could be a boring and benign, and that would be like Jansan, or office supplies, or copier services and things along those lines. So quite literally, any cost category could be an opportunity. It just depends on how it's being managed within that company and where they're looking.
Now, why do you feel that stuff? I know you mentioned that people are so hyper focused on the top end, they're not paying attention
Right.
to stuff below. But is there another reason they're missing
Right.
out on those expenses, that waste?
I think the biggest one is visibility. And then once you have that visibility, then you have to ask yourself, do you have the resources to manage all of those things? So it's a visibility issue, it's a resource issue, and then it's also an expertise issue. So once you identify what cost categories you're overspending in, do you have people that really know that market, as well as the supplier or the vendor does, that can get the best deal? I mean, you could go to market and you can shop around a little bit. And if you're only doing this once a year or once every 3 years for contract renegotiation, you don't really have that level of expertise in that category. What's neat about what we do is, I partner together with other area group consultants, and I partner with the people that are doing the service delivery and the analytics side of things. And since we're contingency based, we dig into things that we realize and see that can really provide a return. No return for the client means no return for us, but they're in those cost categories every single day. So they're going to market, they're getting RFPs, they're negotiating with incumbent vendors, and then they're monitoring the invoicing that comes in. So we have a high degree of expertise and visibility in terms of what's going on in the market for that cost category, well beyond what the client can potentially ever be able to do themselves.
Now, do you find tracking that down is a little bit harder in recent years? It feels like we've had over the past 24 months, it feels like we've had an increase in expenses across the board without kind of an increase in revenues or whatever. Do you feel it's harder now with just kind of that mass growth in spend or costs?
Actually, I think it's probably easier for us because since we're in those cost categories every day, as I mentioned, we see changes right away. So it's not like somebody else would be really slow to see a change. So if you just renegotiated, or you're getting ready to renegotiate a contract on your own in a cost category that you don't touch very often, it could change next month. We may have some level of intuition that it's getting ready to change. So we would have that ability to address that up front, or that there's a trend, and we'd be able to provide some information on trending, versus that single data point, or snapping the line at that point in time to see what they are if you're going and doing those things yourself, like I said, infrequently.
So as far as your review, are you focused on expense categories over time? Are you focused on what that spend should be like to comparable organizations? Can you give us a little bit of insight into kind of how some of those determinations are made without giving away your secret sauce?
Yeah, I mean, it's the secret sauce is just the data that we have. So that's really the secret sauce. Like I said, we'll pull that data and we'll put it into our program, and it tells us which spends are out of a line compared to the benchmark for that industry, for that size of that company. So that's kind of the secret sauce, instant visibility there. So that's the first level, and that's the cost analysis or the opportunity analysis, and that points us in the right direction. And then the next part that I do is I meet with my Air Group consulting partners and show them what I see, and then get additional level of feedback or information from them. So first pass is great. It's directional. It tells you where kind of the North Star is. The second pass is getting with those analysts that are going to tell you which route to take to get the best opportunity. And then you go back to the prospective client and say, hey, we really do feel like there's an opportunity here for you. And here again, is this something that you've got the expertise, the resources, and the time to take on yourself, or do you need help with that?
I was just going to ask if you've ever run into like a really unique expense that you hadn't seen anywhere else. Like, what's the craziest expense that you've seen that just like sticks out in your mind?
It's not really crazy, but it was an eye opener for me, and I had no idea about this. And that is the language translation services that large healthcare operations use. I was completely dumbfounded to see that there's a whole industry out there I had no idea about. And to give you an example, it was a partner of his engagement, and he was sourcing language services for a four-facility medical operation, hospital organization, and they needed language translation services instantaneously, any time of day, 24/7, a real person on the other end in 27 different languages. Wow. And there are actually companies and organizations out there that provide people to you. So it's not like, if somebody, it's not like it was something that was translated in text. And it's not like it was something that was scheduled for, like, quote, a doctor's appointment. It could be an emergency room, at 3 a.m. in, Idaho or Florida or Hawaii or wherever, and you can get somebody that can speak that language, one of those 27 languages, on the line for you to be able to do that translation, so the doctor and the patient can communicate together. So completely dumbfounded with understanding that that's an industry in and of itself, and that there's opportunity for cost savings there because there are actually three big providers in the U.S. that support those kinds of things. And it's just a matter of determining what you need for the area that you're in and who's going to give you the highest level of service based on what your requirements are.
Yeah, that's crazy. I guess sometimes we don't think about everything that goes on behind the scenes in specific organizations and businesses.
Right. Yeah, that was eye-opening for sure. But that just kind of speaks to our capability. We've got folks that can deal with any cost category that you can think of. Since we're global, we're 1,200 consultants around the world. So I partner with people for clients in Texas that are in the UK or in Portugal or in Mexico or in Asia or wherever to support local clients for me and we're nationwide or nationally.
Gotcha. So if you were advising kind of an organization, obviously we interact with a lot of small business owners, local government, those kinds of things. Is there like a piece of advice that you commonly give, when you start these engagements?
I can give, just general advice for a business owner, CEO, president, CFO, finance executive. What do we need to do to start looking at tail spend and being able to consolidate things and not be one of those 93% of businesses that don't look at it to the extent that they should? There's a lot you can do on your own, and that is just being able to have total visibility to everything. So consolidating all the spend data, putting together tools to be able to categorize those things and look at those things over time, so you can track against budget and forecast and see where your spends are. Identify which categories really stick out that you believe that you can bring in the resources to do it. And that's kind of the flip side. There's an ROI here, right? Sure. There's an ROI relative to hiring people to go and do this function and what the return is. So I always like to, a little bit of tongue in cheek here, I always like to say, what's your budget for cost savings? So if you're hiring your own people and you're adding your own overhead, you have to budget for that. Whereas someone like us, we come in and we're on a contingent basis. So our fees come out of the savings that are provided for the client, but there's a balance. It can be a combination of both. And, I'm not saying that, there's only one best way. I think there's an overarching best way, and that's just, put together and consolidate your spend by category, understand what it is, see where your tail spend is and understand where there's some quick wins that you can internalize and do yourselves. Deep dive into your different categories of spend, so you can understand which ones you're weak at and which ones you may need help with. Identify what your resources are and what your expertise is, and then put together a roadmap for solving those problems. And typically, I do recommend outside expertise and resources to help out. And that's where we come in. And what's nice about our value proposition is the fact that we're contingency based. So, no savings, no fee. That's kind of our model.
I wish my doctor was like that, where like I go in, if my knees didn't work better,
Yeah.
if I lost weight instantly,
If your blood pressure doesn't go down, you don't have to pay the bill.
Down, I got good LDLs,
That would be great.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, that would be great.
Well, so we're talking a little bit about that, but let's move on to the heart rate. Let's get into what kind of performance metric do you think is going on in your industry right now? What's that heart rate?
Yeah, for us, just super top line, it kind of goes back to that 96% aren't looking at this, only 4% are doing a really good job at this. And, that came from I want to say it was a Beckett. A lot of this information that I pulled out when I try to do a topical presentation on this and something that's not so Aerocentric, but just general in terms of, tail spend and cost savings and things like that. Outside resources to look at, and that's where that statistic came from. Within our organization, we have a pretty solid statistic that shows that 20% of your indirect and overhead expenses are actionable and need attention. And then out of that 20% that's actionable and needs attention, we can save 10 to 40%. So, that's kind of the pulse of things. That's a really good thumbs up. It's kind of like that first step where we do the analysis and we find out what really sticks out like a sore thumb. That's what that is. 20% is going to stick out like a sore thumb, and it's going to be screaming that it needs attention. Danger Will Robinson, if you will, for those of us who know that reference. And then, as mentioned, within that 20% category, you're overspending, generally speaking, 10 to 40%. It just depends on the category.
Now, in your mind, is there a common reason for that overspend? Is it just forgotten, or just left to itself, or what's the reason for that overspend?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the visibility, the resources for gathering and pulling all this information. The expertise to identify where real opportunities lie. And then, another part that I didn't mention earlier, which ties into this, is that back end of that. Once you identify where the opportunities are, once you have the resources to take that on, whether it's internal or external, you've got to maintain that with the supplier. So often, I've seen situations where, because this is what I lived in my previous, experience in the corporate world, where there's a lot of slippage or leakage, meaning that the suppliers start going off the rails a little bit, double billings, inaccurate billings, decline in service level, agreement performance, incremental changes in pricing that wasn't anticipated, errant expense internal to a company. And so in other words, one-off POs, not using preferred suppliers because you've got an emergency or a crisis, or because of your own personal comfort level, or communication with the organization in terms of what's available and what the correct policies and paths are that you should be following. So there's a lot of that. And, our analysis provides a lot of information there. It will show where your errant spend is. That's part of that whole rationalization where, you've got one category of spend, but you've got 50 or 60 different vendors there. It's because everybody within the organization is going to their own preferred place to get things, instead of to the preferred provider at the preferred rate. And you've got to figure out a way to still make it easy for the needs of the company and for the people that have those purchasing requirements, but have compliance to best practices and negotiated terms with preferred vendors.
So for those organizations, I guess is the fix really specific like purchasing standards, or some sort of control, or some sort of checklist? What's typically the help there for them?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. It can be all of those things above. Procurement policies need to be established and defined. They need to be communicated well, and they need to be adhered to. And the biggest here's another one of those tongue-in-cheek sayings that gets you in trouble every once in a while. But having visible measures and metrics where people can see where the spends are, and where they know it's going to be reported, so there's visibility and there's attention to it. And I had a boss very early on in my career that used to call that management by factual embarrassment. So, get the information, get the information out there where people see it, and it's, you want self accountability. Ultimately, is what you want, and you want to bring in people and have them work together with you to help with those procurement policies, because they need to understand why they're there, and why they're important to the organization as a whole, and potentially to them as an individual if you've got somebody who likes to go off and kind of do their own thing. Being in, coming. Yeah, I was just going to say, coming from manufacturing, that was a big issue. Something breaks and you've got to and the parts aren't on the shelf. So somebody runs down to the hardware store or makes an emergency call to a vendor. So that, making sure you have your minimum quantities established well. You've got, and this is beyond our scope of what we do, but it's still things that we can point out and show to a prospective client, like on the MRO side, that you're not maintaining your internal service levels because you're not maintaining an adequate inventory. And if you maintain the adequate inventory, you can keep these emergency purchases from happening, and then you can also negotiate for better prices with your vendors by having that regular recurring purchase.
I think the visibility is important. In the end, I guess I believe that people don't want to do a bad job. I mean, no one wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, I'm going to suck today." So that visibility is important to kind of have that target, have that understanding, that recognition,
right?
What you're aiming at, what you're targeting.
It's kind of like going back to your doctor, and one of the best visibilities he can tell you is to take your blood pressure every day, right? Amongst other things, so you don't come at the last minute when something's way out of a whack and you haven't been able to watch it for a while.
Like when you go to your dentist and he asks when the last time you flossed, and you say, "Well, when was the last time I was here?"
What's floss?
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to be part of an organization where they had like this lifters and leaners chart. So everybody who was above the line, that was called a lifter, and everyone below the line was a leaner. And so over time, just naturally, you didn't want to see your name on the leaners chart. So everyone kind of started working above that, to try to get above that line.
Management by factual embarrassment again. There we go.
That's it. All right. So aside from the vendors, is there another usual suspect?
One of the ones that we see frequently are just the contract process. So that's another one too. I mean, there's everything that we've covered up until this point that kind of falls into that category that is, touches the path that we're talking about. But there's a lot to be said about implementing and managing good contracts. And one of the ones that I've seen frequently is, the auto-renewing contracts and those kinds of things, where before you know it, you had the best intentions in the world to renegotiate a contract and get and dig in and find better options and better opportunities, but it's auto-renewed before you had a chance to do that. So one of the last companies that I worked with, or technically worked for, we had a no auto-renew policy. We wouldn't accept any contracts that auto-renewed. And then even then, you got to be careful, because what ends up happening is, the supplier will get smart and they'll build in other language within the contract that says you've got to notify them before 90 days of the end of the contract in order to renegotiate the contract within 30 days of it, renewing, or it will auto renew. So all that, pardon my French, crap needs to be, observed and looked at and dug into and monitored well. So that's one that'll sneak up on people, and often does. And, part of what happens when those things happen is it's kind of, to some people, if you're working on the purchasing side and indirect procurement and chasing those things down, it's almost like a relief for you, which it really shouldn't be. The relief being that, oh gosh, it auto-renewed, so I don't have to worry about it right now. So if you're overwhelmed and you've got to go through that negotiation process again, and you don't feel like you've got the resources and time to do it, if it auto-renews, then, it's not a burden to you. Although you may be stuck with unfavorable terms for the next year or 3 years or whatever it may be. So those things are always really important to look at and to monitor. Best recommendation is establishing master service agreements, master purchasing agreements, professional service agreements for vendors that you buy from on a frequent basis. and then managing statements of work and things like that underneath those umbrella contracts. But driving towards consistency with your contracting process is really important.
Now, what about some organizations? Their biggest one of their biggest line items is going to be around payroll. As part of your
Yes.
process, you have a way to scrutinize what kind of staffing levels or those kinds of things?
No, we are not the Bobs. We don't look at
Bobs.
we don't look at we don't look at resource reduction, and we don't touch that at all. It's really about the supply base. The thing that we can support from an employee perspective is we can help with contingent and contract labor. So there may be opportunities for us to negotiate with a contingent or contract labor provider, and then we also do things a lot of things in the employee benefit space. So we can negotiate on the client's behalf relative to insurance and other benefits that are big overhead expenses as it relates to employees. So we help in that area as well. We'll get uh, brokers either love us or hate us. I heard a great comment the other day relative to how we work with insurance brokers, and that is when we go in and we start looking at things, we're giving different insurance brokers an opportunity to come to the plate and go to bat. So that's where the relationship really ends up being strong with us and insurance brokers, is having a relationship in which we can help them get visibility or an opportunity to present something to a prospective client, and then it's up to them to do their best to now do and beat the other ones as well, with us looking kind of over their shoulders to indicate where there's a good value for the client. With insurance and some of those other cost categories, it's a perverse. The ones that have a their commission is based on the size of the sale, and there's a perverse incentive. So even though they negotiate to get things down to a favorable state for the client, they still don't want it too low, because then they're not going to earn the commissions that they would like to. But if we can get more reps in with different insurance brokers and give them more opportunity to come to the plate with more of our clients, then they have the opportunity to win more business. So for them, it ends up being economies of scale in terms of number of clients in their portfolio versus just how big each one is.
Now, as far as the next metric, one of the things that we like to dig into is kind of the strategy side of things. So, along the lines of what we're talking about, what would you say the strategy that strategy metric that leaders should know about?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think the overall monitoring and visibility of this is a big part of it. Once we get into an agreement with a client and we're working on their behalf, we do post-implementation reports. So every invoice cycle that comes throughout the length of the contract that we have with the client, they can see what the savings are, and we'll make adjustments up or down if there's something that's commodity based, so it's favorable for all parties, the supplier, the client, and ourselves. From a strategy perspective, the biggest thing that we need is support from the sponsor. And for us, the sponsor is going to be the CEO, the president, owner, or CFO. So it has to be treated in and of itself as a strategic initiative to monitor and manage tail spend. And that is the strategic activity. It's not we're not looking for one-off. We're going to do this once in a while. We're going to batten down the hatches. We're going to take a look and see where things are, and then you walk away, and then before you know it, it's 12 or 18 months down the road, and then you've got all this errant spend all over again. Processes need to be put in place, like we spoke about earlier, and we just have to be consistent and have some level of visibility. So it's an ongoing, managed assessment, and as you know. Metrics are lagging indicators, so you've got to put things as close to the occurrence of those things happening. So policies first, real-time reporting second, and then post-event or quarterly reporting is water already under the bridge, so you want to be able to look at it before then. So that's the strategic aspect of it, treating it as a strategic initiative in and of itself to manage the tail spend.
So you're coming in, you're helping organizations save money. What happens to that money? Are you guiding them along that line as well? You'd mentioned earlier you're involved with continuous improvement. You're are passionate about that. But are you just saving money? Or
Right.
are you also following through with, hey, now that you have this bucket of money, here's some ways that you can
Right.
improve your business?
I'm almost embarrassed because I was supposed to say some of those things up front, but so thanks for reminding me on
Oh, sure,
that.
sure.
Yeah, so that's what the doctor's for, right? Um, a big part of that is exactly to your point. It's not just about saving dollars. It's what are those dollars going to do for you? And from a cost savings, when we're working on a contingent basis and we're saving a company money, one net dollar of savings is a dollar directly to the bottom line, and that buys them a lot of different things. And to your point, you want it to be an emotional tie-in that it's not just dollars to the bottom line. It's improvement in EBITDA. It's improvement in multiples. It's improvement in capital available for capital purchases, or for making a strategic hire, or for sort of doing some other strategic initiative. So those are the really important things that we try to do. Is this is found money that you wouldn't have gotten in and of yourself for the most part. Now you can go and do these other things that you really need to get done, and you've got a partner working with you, taking this pressure off of you, so you're not sitting there having this nagging doubt about what is leaking out. What are the holes in the boat? What's leaking out the back door, or whatever. So that's the partnership aspect of things. It's just we are an extension of that business, working on their behalf. We're taking most of the risk, because if we don't find any savings opportunities for them, then we're not going to make any money for ourselves. But we are being that extra resource. Kind of goes back to the statement I made earlier about, what's your budget for cost savings? Well, if we're working on a contingency basis and we're finding something that you couldn't find in and of yourself, then, here again, there's no budget. It's found money. So, one of the things I talk to referral partners a lot, because I do a lot in the, business to business referral partner space. I have a lot of folks that are business coaches or continuous improvement coaches that do a lot of the process related things that we talked about. They get kind of the pushback where the client says, "I can't afford you right now." Well, that's a value add. We can come in and we can do we can analyze things. We can find money for them so they can afford those things that they would like to do, and just can't right now.
Now, are there like common pillars where after you save money, they come back and reinvest in, a business coach, or whatever? Are there like 2 or 3 common categories that are, those 10x categories that, hey, you saved $1, let's go spend it here, and will really impact EBITDA?
I think the biggest one that I've seen from my perspective is the continuous improvement process related folks. So there is opportunity to use the tool sets that those people have, and there are a lot of folks out there that do a lot of really, really good work. And the challenge there is finding the right alignment. So it's finding the right personality. It's finding the person that has the right focus, somebody that's going to give you a quick return. So that's one area that gets a lot of attention kind of immediately. Quite honestly, another area that gets a lot of attention is just not, making sure that you're profoundly in the black, and you're not teetering on, you're not dealing with cash flow issues. And we're talking about bigger mid-market companies. That's usually not the case so much, but there can be opportunities there where this can help improve cash flow. And then a really big one when it comes to private equity and M&A and all that good stuff is just increasing that EBITDA, making the company more valuable, increasing the multiple, so it's more attractive for future acquisition and for sale.
Got it. Now, what about as part of the work that you do you look at I guess depending on the organization, if the organization has a particular product or solution that they're selling, are you also looking at the front end, what their pricing, they're offering for, or how they're putting things together?
Not so much, not really. I think one of the things that we can do is we can come up with alternatives or alternate supplies of materials when we go and we do the negotiation for the client. So, I'll give you an example, and this is kind of a departure from our norm. I mentioned that we focus primarily on indirect and overhead, and we're focusing on the long tail. Every once in a while, we'll get into an engagement where we do support a lot of purchasing, procurement on the direct side of things. So chemicals, some raw materials, foodstuffs, oil and gas, and then kind of quasi in between would be packaging and things along those lines. So being able to source and finding alternate chemicals, which are substitutions. Yeah, at that, it's kind of like finding a generic versus paying for a brand name. Something that a client wouldn't have thought of themselves potentially, or had the ability to find something that was of the greater quality that they needed, that we've been able to source for them. So that is something that can kind of help, kind of more or less on the front end, because it's more aligned with direct materials.
Okay.
And those kinds of things. So yeah.
Now, do you find that in our post-tariff world that's harder or easier, or how are things there in getting those raw materials?
So I get that question a lot, and the challenge in my answer is I'm on the business development and the project management side of things. So I really rely on our service delivery people. Okay. Here again, they're independent consulting partners, just like I am. And here again, their earnings come from the fees that we generate in providing those cost savings, but they're the ones that are chasing down those things for the most part. So they've got intimate expertise and knowledge of what's going on in the markets, especially as it relates to tariffs and things like that. So I can't give you any specific or direct examples of negative impact from tariffs, but I know that our people are looking at those kinds of things and still able to provide savings for clients, regardless of the tariff situation.
Gotcha. Now, as far as the organizations that you've worked with, do you work with governmental entities as well, or is it all mid-market type organizations?
Yeah, we are industry agnostic, and it really just it's kind of the different industries count and quantify or qualify businesses in different categories based on different things. For us, it's gross revenue, but truth, and for some companies, it's headcount. Like insurance brokers and employee benefits companies and things like that. They're looking at headcounts, and that's more of an indicator for them than gross revenue is. Ultimately, gross revenue is kind of like the leading point for us. It's really about spend. Is really what we're looking at. So, as an example, I gave, I stated mid-market companies, $15 million gross revenue and higher. Do have 2 clients right now that are under $10 million. They sound very small, but we're looking at their top line spends. So that's where there's a departure, where really, like I said, the focus is on spend categories and the size of those spends. Gotcha. So, kind of going back to your question on government agencies, it can be any industry or entity. Here again, size of the spend's the most important, but we do focus a lot on manufacturing, multi-facility healthcare, built environment construction, large professional service firms, large nonprofits of all different varieties. Higher education, private education, and local governments too. And the government situation is a little bit different. I mean, every governmental entity is a little bit has its own hoops you've got to jump through, and some are easy to work with and have a little bit more latitude in terms of how they can manage an engagement. And some of them are just impossible to work with. So they can be a little bit more challenging.
Gotcha. Well, going back to, we talked before a little bit about, managing contracts, having purchasing policies, those kinds of things. But we haven't really talked about things like financial controls. What kinds of things are you talking about around financial controls in organizations, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the financial controls would just be monitoring it over time. I mean, get that initial snapshot and see where things are. And then once we decide that we're going to take on a project and work to improve that, for us, we'll come up with a sensitivity analysis that gives a really good indication of what we think the savings are going to be. And we typically engage with a client over a 3-year contracted period, where we're acting as their procurement team, their procurement department for that cost category, that good or service. during that entire time, but we're monitoring every single invoice that comes in, as mentioned. So we're making sure that there's good supplier compliance. We're making adjustments in terms of the fee that we take for what we've earned from during each invoicing, and making adjustments relative to anything that's related to indice based or commodity based type index or whatever. I'm kind of repeating myself, but so that those are the post-implementation reports that give the client a tremendous amount of visibility in terms of cumulative savings over time. So it proves itself out. There's no doubt that it's there. And then the other aspect would be just going back in and doing those kinds of analysis, the high-level one, on some kind of regular and routine basis. It's part of that roadmap that you would put together. Be a 4%er, not a 96%er. Have regular dashboarding in place where you're monitoring those things. So it's the actual spend versus the budget versus the forecast. So we want to monitor and match those and be able to look at that. And they can be, it doesn't have to be super granular. It can be, kind of a higher level, category level, depending upon, what the client's sensitivity is to it. But at least you're monitoring things, and then you can do a little bit deeper dive as you refine your processes and your performance reporting to show more and more detail as it's required.
Now, I heard you say something about one of the things you do is you create a roadmap for your clients. Can you talk about some of the elements of that roadmap?
Yeah, I mean the roadmap for us is just the implementation piece. So we go ahead and the client chooses which option they want based on the proposals we provide for them. And one of the things that we really got to emphasize is when we look at cost savings, we're not just looking at the bottom line cost savings. We're looking at everything else related to the qualitative aspect of what they purchase. So service level agreements, other quality metrics that are required, delivery timelines and those kinds of things, order fulfillment, compliance, and other regulatory issues that they may have to have. So it's total value. So we may come back with the client and show them, we can save them 50% on this cost category with this particular item, but the better value for them is something that only saves them 25% because it satisfies those other qualitative aspects of the engagement. So, having the service level agreements in place, being able to monitor and measure those, that's part of the roadmap. The other roadmap would be, the roadmap for us is just doing the initiative and monitoring it over time. The roadmap for them may be, well, now that we've got Air Group working on these projects, maybe in a year from now, they come in, they do a deep dive again, and they find other projects that they can take on to cover other areas. The last thing we would want to do is jump into like 10 or 12 projects with a brand new client and create all sorts of upheaval and try to do too much too quickly. So try to manage the bandwidth, and so that's part of it. And then the other part of that, it's not really a defined roadmap as much as it is educating the client. So we get in and we're doing the engagement with them, and we've got a 3-year agreement, and we're working through the process. As we get close to closing out that, one of two things happens. Typically, the client either wants us to maintain the engagement and continue to act on their behalf in that category, which is easy for us to extend, or they want to take over that themselves. And so we'll train them in everything that we've been doing relative to that category so they can pick up and just run with it when we leave. So we're not just like dropping the ball or dropping a hot potato in their lap or whatever metaphor we want to use here. But we're giving them the education so that they, teaching them how to fish as much as, just providing the fish for them. So that's part of that roadmap type piece. But every client's a little bit different in terms of what they want and how to manage that. So we just talk about those things over time and do everything that we can do to continue to provide value for them.
Now, are there 2 or 3 important aspects of the training that you provide that you find that the organizations really take to heart and is really impactful for them?
I think just the visibility aspect of it, dashboard, scorecards, whatever they need to have for that. So if we're managing all that up front, then we want to be able to hand that off to them. So that would be part of it. Being able to negotiate the contract better, what to look for in the contract, what we've done up until that point, if they want to take it on for themselves, so they can replicate and do those things themselves in that category, and or apply those learnings to other categories. And then, I think another big part of it, even though it's more of a soft, I don't, it's kind of like the difference between a hard cost and a soft cost, is just the confidence that they can go and do some of these things because they know where to look and they've seen an example. So just elevating their level of professionalism when it comes to dealing with the tailspin type stuff is a big part of that. So is there a tangible, direct roadmap that we provide for them? Not really. Is there a roadmap relative to how we enter into an engagement with them and how we monitor that over time? Yes, absolutely, definitely. And then as we exit from them, we work with them on a unique basis, category by category, to do that transition. So those would look different.
Now, as far as the we talked about saving on the bottom, another dollar added. We talked about helping guide them. Do you have a process for, I guess, steering them down strategic growth or growth opportunities or anything like that?
Actually, not so much. That's really something that they would take on themselves, maybe with some other kind of expertise, a level of expertise, some other, trusted advisor that they could work with. Myself personally, and I know that a lot of the other Era Group consulting partners know a lot of people in those spaces that we have developed relationships with, that we reciprocate referrals back and forth. And that we trust as well. So, for me, I always try to make sure that I'm doing value-added introductions to my clients or to my prospects, so that they know that there are other resources out there that are available to them. And when it comes to those kinds of things, I typically try to provide 2 or 3 different options so they can find the right one for them. So I don't want to vouch for someone and then that person or that entity come in and work for them and it not work out. I want to give them, hey, these are 3 people that I know, or 3 organizations that I know that are highly touted, very recognizable in the business community and do a really, really good job. I think it's worth your time to talk to them and see what they can do for you. And then, so it's a little bit of pre-vetting, but then it's also bringing awareness and attention to them that other resources are available. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy the most out of what I do. Is I want to provide value any way that I can, and even if I can't get a direct engagement with a client or a prospective client, I want to be able to provide other resources for them, so that they can grow their business in whatever way they need to.
You'd mentioned that you work with a lot of other consultants like you, in your organization and stuff.
Right.
Are there certain skills you feel that is important for all you guys to have that's kind of shared across everyone?
Yeah, I do, and I think they're more. Gosh, I don't know what the best way to say this would be. I don't want them to sound like altruisms, but it has to be somebody that you have a good rapport with. So somebody that you can communicate with, and you can build a relationship, and that you can have some level of friendship or likability. So, everybody's different, and some people are attracted by different types of people. So, oftentimes I'll get on an initial call with a prospective client with another consulting partner, and one of the 2 of us will gravitate more towards the client, and they'll connect better with one or the other, and that's just a personality type difference. So that person may end up taking the lead moving forward. So, that personableness, that building the rapport on the front end is highly important. Another big piece of that is competence. So competence is highly important. So one of the things that I can say about Era Group is you don't continue to be an Era Group consulting partner if you're not competent. So and then when we partner together with other consulting partners, we vet each other out. So just like I made the example where you may have 2 or 3 referrals from me for, a controller or a business coach or a continuous improvement coach or an EOS implementer or whatever. You interview them and you pick the best one. I do the same thing within Era Group when it comes to, fulfilling a client engagement. If I'm looking at logistics, there are a number of different Era Group consultants that are in the logistics space. And I have to find the right one that fits my client relative to their personality, their demeanor, the needs of the company, what categories they're looking at within that space, what their requirements are. So, I've got my own interview list on, and even though these are people I know, we still go through the process of making sure I've got good alignment with myself and with the prospective client and for the SDS for the project that's at hand. So it's the likability aspect, the rapport, it's the competence piece, and then the third piece in my mind, I may be leaving something out, but these are the three that I typically think about is trustworthiness.
Sure.
It's got to be somebody that, says, they say what they're going to do and they do what they say. So being able to follow through, be consistent, communicate well, have a high level of trust. So rapport, likability, competence, and trustworthiness.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that, and that's
Yeah.
I guess I don't want to say it mirrors us, but very similar to our industry. We like to think that.
Yeah, and those are general business themes that I think we all strive for in any business relationship or business engagement, even just from a personal perspective too.
Sure. Yeah, if you're going to be in a foxhole with a client and you guys are going to be battling together, you want to make sure you got someone you can trust and work with, and at the end of the day, we're all people. So being people to other people is as valuable of a skill as anything else out there.
Yeah, and I think the other big part of that is exactly to your point, who you want to be in the foxhole with, and then the bonding that you develop, as you go through those experiences are refining for both parties. So that's a big aspect of it as well. So
Kind of
lifelong memories, and not to get mushy or anything like that when we're talking about business, but you develop those brothers in arms, if you will, brothers, sisters in arms, that you recall the events 10, 20 years down the road, and you can talk with that person and kind of reflect with them on those experiences, and have affection for the challenges that you went through and the adversity that you faced and what you were able to overcome.
Well, see, that sounds like a new company name, something like the Business Band of Brothers or something,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I can see other patients today, so we're coming near the end of our time. But kind of for my after action summary, if a leader organization out there could only act on one insight from our conversation today, what do you think should rise to the top of their priority list right now?
Don't have a fear of finding out. Be brave enough to be one of the 4%ers that are looking at those kinds of things. Whatever we find, it's not a reflection on poor management of the business. It's just the state of what most businesses are in. Most businesses aren't looking at these things, and they can all use attention in this area. And I could state, based on my experience over decades, that everybody's wasting money somewhere. And just dig in and find it, and find a partner that can help you with that, so you can go and work on the things that are really, really important to you. What we do is significant, but it's a small part of everything else that big exec and organizational leaders need to focus on. And for me, we're a stress reliever. I look at myself as being a pain reliever. We're taking some burden, some pain, some stress, some pressure off of the executive leadership team, so they can go and work on what's really important, and they can have the nagging doubts that are in the back of their mind, removed. That these things are being looked at, they're being taken care of, and we've got somebody we can trust to help us with that.
Now we want to send our audience home with. Thanks for that. We want to send our audience home with something that they can take after we leave. So beyond being brave and taking action, is there one practical action or habit that leaders should implement? After they listen to this episode.
Yeah, the biggest, most practical application or action that they can take is just the initial engagement with us. And the initial engagement with us is just doing the cost assessment. There's no fee for the cost assessment. And, it's like it's going to the doctor and getting your checkup and seeing what your vitals are. So, and then, the prospect is always in complete control. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I said that's my stick.
Okay,
vitals.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean that's the challenge. You just have us do the assessment, and there's either something there, or there's nothing there. And if there is something there, it's the prospect's choice whether to engage or not. So there's no harm, no foul. Gives them some insight, gives them free consulting, if you will. But at least they'll know where opportunities lie.
Gotcha. Now, if one of our audience wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my connection is just Aaron Reinick, and I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me. I have a booking link on my profile homepage, and it's my first initial last name at aerogroup.com for my email address. But LinkedIn is I'm out there. I'm pretty visible. I do a lot of things. Do a number of speaking engagements here and there in the DFW area, but easy to find.
Yeah, and we'll put your LinkedIn, typically on the podcast, it'll be right underneath your video.
Sounds good.
All right, and then for myself, if you have an interest in technology or managed services and want to reach out to me or just want to compliment me on having such fine guests on my podcast, you can always reach me at the doctor at fulcrumgroup.net or on LinkedIn. That'll be in the notes. And wow, that brings us to the end of our doctor's appointment. If there's one theme that I think ran through today's conversation, I think it's if you're looking to scrutinize these things, it comes from a little bit of forcing yourself to act, coming up with some clarity, thinking about the discipline, and just doing things, just doing it consistently. So as the discussion today helps you find that focus. Sorry, I'm getting feedback through your mic.
Is that better?
Yes, I think so. So I guess at this point, just subscribe to Talk to the Doc podcast. Leave me a note. Check me out on your favorite platform. I'm your host, Steve the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is out. Thanks so much, Aaron. Appreciate you.